evening, everyone. My name is Phil Robertson, and thank you for joining us in this session to discuss the NGO law that Thailand is proposing to bring in. I'm a member of the FCCT board, and we have several speakers with us tonight who are going to explain the various ins and outs of the law and what has happened so far and what the possible impacts would be on Thai civil society if the law was passed. This has been an issue that has come up really since mid-February when on February 23rd, the Thai cabinet suddenly announced considering a draft law and caught everyone by surprise, frankly. The law, once it became clear, once the draft was brought out, was subjected to a great deal of criticism from Thai and international NGOs, embassies, and UN personnel, UN agencies. And it has now gone back for another round of consultations with the Thai government, but there's still a lot of concerns about what is going to happen next. And I'm going to bring in our speakers to say a few words. But before I do that, I want to also indicate that the club, as you know, is online. We are operating this way because, of course, the ongoing Thai issue, Thai government regulations. But we do need your support. Please do continue to support the club. I also want to say that next week we're going to have a panel to discuss the issues of strategies connected to Thailand's vaccine rollout. This will be on the 22nd. Thursday the 22nd, starting at 6 p.m. We'll be joined to discuss all aspects of the Thai response to COVID-19, not only what they did well in 2020, but also what has now happened with the failure to control new COVID outbreaks and the slow acquisition of vaccines. We've even had cases where embassies have had to source vaccines for their own citizens. We'll be joined next week by the ambassador of Switzerland, Assistant Professor Dr. Pui from Mahidol University, Dr. Titinan Pongsudarak from Chulalongkorn University, Tom Krusapon, who's an entrepreneur who's been lobbying for greater private sector involvement in vaccine procurement, and also Dr. Damika Leshan Wanigam, who's an infectious disease specialist at Chula. So next week on the 22nd, please also put that in your 6 p.m. For the issue that everybody has been talking about in these last days. So joining me tonight, we have an esteemed panel of UN officials, representatives of international donors, and Thai NGOs. We invited the Thai government to also join this panel, but several spokespersons declined to take part. We, of course, always welcome the Thai government to make its views known on these kind of issues, and it's unfortunate they weren't able to join us. So I'm going to, first of all, start by introducing Katya Chirisi. She's the Deputy Representative of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, or OHCHR, their regional office in Southeast Asia. OHCHR has been monitoring this situation very closely with the Thai NGO law. There was also representations by several of UN special rapporteurs, part of the special procedures of the OHCHR, who made representations to the Thai government based on the first draft of the NGO law. And let me turn it over now to Katya for her remarks, and then we'll move on next after that to Pianut Kotsan from Amnesty International, and then Rosai Wongsuban from the Freedom Fund. Katya, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Phil, and thank you to the Foreign Correspondent Club of Thailand for organizing this timely discussion tonight. We are very pleased on behalf of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to be part of this conversation tonight. You already referred to the joint communication or engagement of the UN Special Rapporteurs earlier this year on the draft legislation we are discussing tonight. And on the 31st of March, the UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Peaceful Assembly and Association, the Special Rapporteur on Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Freedom of Opinion and Expression, and the Special Rapporteur on the Situation of Human Rights Defenders issued a joint communication to the Thai government, raising concerns about the two draft laws on the promotion and development of the CSOs by the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security, and on the operation of the not-for-profit organizations by the Council of States. And this joint communication was received by the Council of State on the 1st of April. On the 29th of June, the Cabinet agreed to introduce additional principles into the draft law to reflect international standards related to anti-money laundering, combating the financing of terrorism, and the non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. And as you mentioned, currently, these additional principles have been made public for online public consultation on the website of the Council of States until the 1st of August. Based on the information received about the draft law's content and its legislative process, our office would like to address three critical human rights issues for further discussion tonight. Starting from international human rights standards and the compliance of the draft legislation with them. In the joint communication that UN Special Rapporteurs have issued, they highlighted 5 key concerns. There is concern that the draft law contains a phrase indicating that non-profit organizations, hereby will refer to NPOs, just for ease of reference, must serve the public and national interests without any hidden agenda, which could lead to stigmatization and negative perception of NPOs as a potential threat to the society due to the lack of emphasis on the positive role of civil society actors. The second concern Special Rapporteurs highlighted is the broad definition of NPOs and excessive reliance of ministerial discretion. Under this law, the definition of NPOs covers a wide range of associations, from established NGOs to informal online groups. And these restrictions may pose obstacles to the realization of the rights of freedom of association, with the Special Rapporteurs emphasize should be extended to associations that are not registered. And the Special Rapporteurs also stress that any individuals involved therein can carry out activities, including holding peaceful assemblies, without facing criminal sanctions. Furthermore, the MPL bill grants the Minister of Interior an absolute discretion in determining the criteria, methods, and conditions for NPO registration, which all NPOs must comply with. This provision leaves the possibility that the minister could use their discretion to restrict the activity of NPOs critical to the government. And to this point, the Special Rapporteurs recalled the Human Rights Council Resolution 22/6, which calls for states to ensure that the procedures for registration of CSOs are transparent, accessible, non-discriminatory, expeditious, and inexpensive, allowing for the possibility to appeal and avoid requiring re-registration, and they are in conformity with international human rights law. Under this draft law, NPOs are also subject to burdensome financial and reporting obligations, which could add burden to civil society sector and impact on their ability to carry out their legitimate work. So the Special Rapporteurs raised particular concern for smaller community-based organizations that might lack the capacity to comply with such requirements and may face severe repercussions, including the closure of organizations, fines, and imprisonment. Another concern that the Special Rapporteurs highlighted was the restriction on foreign funding, which once again grants the Minister of Interior absolute discretion to permit or prohibit activities supported by foreign funders. The Special Rapporteur's letter explicitly stated that funding restrictions violate Article 22 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which guarantees the right to freedom of association without state interference. Particularly worrisome is another provision allowing the government to access NGOs' electronic communications without robust, independent oversight systems and effective remedies in case of abuses. This could impinge on their right to privacy protected under Article 17 of the ICCPR. The Special Rapporteur's fifth and last concern is about potential punishment for non-compliance. The draft law prescribes that those failing to comply with all the legal requirements shall have their registration revoked. Still, such requirements, including the criteria for revoking registration, are entirely based on the Minister of Interior's discretion. No right to appeal has been provided in the MPO's bills, and the Special Rapporteur stated that the suspension and involuntary dissolution of an association should be strictly proportional to the legitimate aim pursued and used only when softer measures would be insufficient. Moreover, MPOs that insist on operating without registration would face imprisonment not exceeding 5 years or get fined not exceeding 100,000 baht, or both. And the Special Rapporteurs noted that such penalties are neither necessary nor proportionate to the violation. An association shall never be subject to criminal sanctions for their failure to register. Now, in addition to the concerns expressed by the Special Rapporteur, additional ones relate to the recent provisions recently approved, which relate to money laundering and weapon proliferation and a cluster around that, which reportedly require MPOs to disclose information about the implementation of their projects and inform the government about the type of information that they share with foreign funders. While acknowledging that it's crucial for Thailand to comply with international standards related to AML, CFT, and NWMD, determined by the Financial Act Task Force, the UN human rights mechanisms have dealt with other examples where states use AML, CFT principles in domestic legislation to regulate NPOs, especially those critical of governments, and when this happens unnecessarily and disproportionately. For example, in November 2020, the Special Rapporteur on the promotion and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms while countering terrorism has submitted a communication to the government of Serbia about the Serbian law on preventing money laundering and financing terrorism. Allegedly, this was done in the context of the Serbian anti-money laundering agency enforcing a law to obtain information on financial transaction data related to 20 civil society actors which were critical, were involved in human rights work and were also involved in war crime investigations. In this case, the Special Rapporteur and other relevant UN experts highlighted that civil society plays a vital role in channeling discontent and allowing for constructive engagement with states, and indirectly undermining the factors leading to individuals to be drawn to terrorism and violent extremism. In the communication, the Special Rapporteurs also highlighted that the measures for ensuring NPO's compliance with AML and CFT standards must be focused and proportionate and in line with the risk-based approach and should not disrupt or discourage legitimate charitable activities. Without an objective risk assessment, the SR pointed out, the legislation could contravene the provisions of the ICCPR, including Article 19, 22, and 25, which guarantee the freedoms of opinion, expression, and of association, and the right to take part in the conduct of public affairs. Important to note that UN special procedures have raised similar concerns about potential adverse impact on civil society sectors, also in other countries where governments adopted similar laws under FATF principles, including Turkey and Venezuela. We understand that Thailand's anti-money laundering office ran a study on the risk assessment and exploitation of NPOs by the international terrorist groups. Even though the study shows that Thailand has a moderate risk level, the government decided to incorporate AML CFT provisions into the NPO's law. This could lead to similar concerns that the law would not be focused and proportionate and in line with the risk-based approach, and might potentially disrupt or discourage legitimate charitable activities and undermine rather than enhance security, as the UN Special Rapporteur's assessment indicated in similar cases. Now, briefly, I will turn to a couple of other issues which relate, one, to participation. Public participation in the legislative process, as the Council of States conducts a review of the operation on the non-profit organization draft law. We understand that the agency has been organizing consultation with the relevant government authorities. Further, the agency has also engaged with a group of NGOs and opened an online public consultation in March 2021. After the introduction of the new AML and FT provisions, as mentioned earlier, the Council of State is currently hosting another round of public consultation until August the 1st. While acknowledging the attempt of the government to ensure the right to participation of the public through conducting a public hearing, as stipulated in Section 77 of the 2017 Thailand's Constitution, concerns remain regarding meaningful participation during the current nationwide COVID-19 outbreak. According to information received during the online consultation of the operation of the non-profit organization draft law, only 11 submissions were received, and 299 organizations and 26 individuals participated so far in the process. We are further concerned about the lack of meaningful consultation on the AML-CFT principles due to this technical regulations complexity and the limited time period provided for the step in the legislative process. Moreover, we would like to note that the awareness about these laws appear uneven in different regions. Remarkably, NPOs in regions outside of Bangkok, including in the southern border provinces, still have little knowledge about this draft law. And it is important to adopt additional measures to increase the awareness when the Council of State finishes its review and the whole draft NPOs bill will be made public again for the public consultation before submission to the Cabinet and later to the Parliament for the promulgation process. Lastly, a point of concern is the lack of a clear legislative timeline for the legislation of the draft NPOs law. The COVID-19 situation also poses further uncertainty in determining when the law will be resubmitted to the Cabinet and the Parliament. We are concerned that the current lack of information about the bill's timeframe, which hinders the civil society sector's ability to plan their advocacy with relevant authorities to help ensure the draft is amended in line with international human rights standards, as recommended by the Special Rapporteur in the communication sent to Thailand in March 2021. Concluding, Thailand is heading towards a third cycle under the Universal Periodic Review in November 2021. During the previous cycle, 12 among 22 recommendations related to fundamental freedoms were supported by the Thai government, including one recommendation on bringing national legislation on freedom of expression and assembly in compliance with international law. I hope the discussion today can help to develop an effective strategy to support civil society organizations as reflected in the initial intention of the draft bill. I would like to conclude by emphasizing the importance of compliance of the NPO's bill with international human rights law and standards without obstructing Thai civil society sector from carrying out their legitimate and crucial work. And our office, our regional office, certainly stands ready to provide technical support to all concerned stakeholders in upholding Thailand's obligations to international human rights standards. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for that excellent exposition of the key issues on human rights surrounding the draft law that was proposed in February and considered in March. There is a lot of things to unpack there. Quite clear has been a process that has not really been terribly transparent from the government, not only in the initial February 23rd announcement when they said all of a sudden that they had considering a law, but then more recently in the June 29th cabinet meeting, which brought in the anti-money laundering and counter-terror issues that you just cited as well. So it seems to me that there is a number of issues that we're going to talk about in terms of overall compliance with international human rights. But before we get to that, I'd like to bring in Kun Pianut Kotsan, who's the director of Amnesty Thailand. And I, want to ask her about how this is going to actually impact NGOs. I mean, she leads the Amnesty chapter for Thailand, working extensively with grassroots organizations and community organizations around the country. And I'd like to ask her to reflect on what she is seeing and what sort of impact she thinks the draft law would have if it passed in its current form, which is a form that is quite restrictive towards freedom of association.
Thank you so much, Phil, and thanks, Phil, and I would like to thank FCCT that letting me speak while it's still legal to do so. Well, I have some thing to share on the screen as well. First of all, I must say that this government seems to have create more and more laws that attempt to do more or less the same things to silence any opposition or any criticism. And when you ask me about like how it's going to impact for the Thai civil society, I think mostly it will be a large impact because the weight and the way that define the law, it just includes like not only human rights organization, but like all the groups that trying to do their works, even the small group or humanitarian. However, even before the law, you can see that there was some internet troll or some type of thing that share virally that trying to have the dialogue on linking between these NGOs and foreign money to try to do some bad things for the country. We can see all the list that is the watch list, and you can see that even FCCC is part of the list too, and even Netflix and things. So it's this, but however, this type of thing is being shared around, and although we have as you can see, this organization, the list here that we have the statement, joint statement, and submit and share to the public and Thai government. It doesn't seem to make even anything to response like any responsible and responsive from the government side. Especially they have a very inadequate consultation process as well. But we can see why this law start to be super active and government try to push because of the situation, political situation, and how the uprising of young people on the street. Or last year, even they have the situation with COVID-19 or a lot of restriction and a lot of repressive law to try to stop them to exercise their rights on public assembly or freedom of expression. And since there's so many cases of human rights violation from this protest, a lot of human rights organizations speak up and do whatever it takes. But then this is what we get for that because of the this law that Phil already briefed about. There was two laws that related to status of the non-government organization in Thailand, and I can talk a bit about this before I go to how it's likely to impact, because originally the this one, the Supporting and Promoting Civil Society Organization Act, was mainly started to support the civil society organization and hoping that they could be able to get the support and funding, and it would help their work. But some the draft of this law on operation of non-for-profit organization seem to have the further includes all the key developments like NGO must register with Ministry of Interior, NGO must operate according to the law which is signed by the Ministry of Interior and what NGO can do or cannot do, and NGO must report their source of income and report their auditing process and publish it, and the criminal punishment. The part that it seemed to be like gonna create a lot of the nightmare bureaucratics for the small group or small NGOs, and also they can use all sort of things to be the license to interfere the privacy or surveillance on the works that the organization trying to do. Basically, I mean, we always have a report to Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Interior. We have the auditing. We do everything by book. But this is the type of tools that they trying to use just to create more fears, and also the criminal punishment. It's quite strong because it could be in prison, and although how the government say that they are democracy, they are elected government, but somehow the law itself it's not respect or according to the constitution, especially in the section of human dignity, right, liberties, and equalities of the people shall be protected. It's very obvious to see that this come out just for the reason to restrict the right of association, and also discriminate the form of discrimination, because you never know that you will be one of the organization will get in trouble, but for sure the one that being highlighted is the one who seem to speak up and criticize on the government, but because of the government doesn't act on their role to follow the international obligations. And in terms of fundings that that's related for us, and we all know that years and years non-profit organization receive major of the funding from overseas, and there's no problem with it. Government have the funding from overseas too. There was a development project, joint project between governments, NGO, or the UN. And the money is from overseas, from the AIDS agency, from the government aids too. So when you are talking and when they're trying to create the dialogue that we get foreign money, it's always happen, and it's the work that we do is contributing support or humanitarian and human rights for the society, especially this time at the time that we have a critical time of COVID-19, or we can see that the issue of inequality is just so clearer and come out from the that's come out clearly right now, or it's the issue in Myanmar and people trying to asylum to the borders, or the issue of enforced disappearance that happen in this ASEAN regions. This type of things, it's supposed to be the time that government have to act on their role to protect people rights and stop burden the NGO to do their jobs. For us, Amnesty ourselves, we had this trouble. Even this even this news of the NGOs come out in the way that not only by the way that how we work, like we have been registered with the Ministry of Interior, Amnesty International Thailand, and we have the board elected. But one of our board, the young board member, he's a prominent activist, nativist, and the Ministry of Interior doesn't register proceed the register of him as the board due to what he have done that in terms of his action or his campaign, which is considered a form of discrimination. But this law is just like official or license to be discriminate and silence people who speak up and try to do their job to support human. It will impact the privacy of association for sure, and the criminal penalty is quite strong. So we try to push and recommend that it should be withdraw the draft of act immediately, and reaffirm that human rights obligations have to be protect, promote, and fulfill to the right of association. That's what we ask for. Although we know that lastly, before I end here, that we believe that Thai government will have no problem pursue this NGO bill since they have already charged hundreds of people for defamation and 112, even 14 years old girls or old ladies that have to be charged in jail for 43 years. So if they can do that, they have no shame of treating NGOs too. And no one should be criminalized because they stand up for their human rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pianut. Appreciate the very candid discussion about the core elements of the actual draft law, the one that was considered in March and has now been sent back to the Council of State for further revisions. My understanding was, in fact, that there was a lot of issues raised not only by NGOs, but also by some of the diplomats and some of the international organizations as well. And we'll talk about that during the question and answer period. Let me now turn to our third speaker, Rosai Wongsuban, who's a program advisor for the Freedom Fund, but also has done extensive work working with migrant worker organizations, migrant worker groups, and those are organizations which also look to be likely impacted by this draft law. So, Kun Rosai, can you join us? She's joining us from actually down in Suratani, and I thank you very much for joining us far away from Bangkok. It's great to have you here.
สวัสดีค่ะ Let me introduce myself a little bit. My name is Roysai Wongsuban. I'm actually working in the non-profit sector for I think almost 10 years. Currently, I'm working with the Freedom Fund. So what actually Freedom Fund is doing in Thailand? Freedom Fund is a donor, and we are working as an international organization, and we are partnership with the frontline organization that are trying to dealing and tackle the issue of forced labor and human trafficking in the seafood sector. Freedom Fund has started working in Thailand back in 2016, and we have continued working with the broader stakeholders, not just only NGOs. We have worked with the seafood working group, which is the comprise of the big buyers company, NGOs, as well as seafood processor in Thailand. I always have a dialogue with the Royal Thai government to address our concern about human trafficking and forced labor, and also identify what the challenge that we could tackle together. So I'm surprised when I heard about this draft law because I think Thai government may not well calculate what will be the adverse impact on the progress of seafood reform in Thailand. I think most of the FCCT members may remember back in 2014, 2015, when Thailand was on spotlight of international media about the issue of human slavery, illegal fishing, and it leads Thailand to get the EU yellow card on IUU, illegal, unregulated fishing from European Union, as well Thailand trafficking performance was downgraded to Tier 3 by the US government. Together, Royal Thai government, the whole seafood business sector, and international organization, international donors, and local civil society, even migrant worker lead organizations are working together, try to reform this industry and try to ensure that the customer at the end at the supermarket, they will know that Thai seafood supply chain has been cleaned up. It introduced the concept of traceability and transparency in supply chain. And why I would like to emphasize the adverse impact on the seafood sector. As everyone knows, Thailand is one of the largest seafood processor, and actually Thailand is the hub of seafood processing. We actually outsource raw materials and process and export from Thailand to the whole global market. When EU gave Thailand the yellow card and US government downgrade Thailand, it has impact on trade and business. Thailand may lose the access to the European market as well as the opportunity or trust from the customers, whether if they consume seafood product in Thailand, will it made by someone blood or tear or not? So then what actually NGO work with the business sector to do to, not, I don't want to say like improve the public image, but we actually try to reform the whole process and people in this seafood industry. Mostly NGOs are working directly with the business partner in terms of technical assistance, how to ensure that their supply chain will become more traceable, and what will be code of conduct of operation in the business to meet the international and domestic regulations and compliance. For X, I would like to give the concrete evidence. Freedom Fund actually funding Migrant Worker Rights Network, or known as MWRN, which is a migrant-led organization in Samut Sakhon. They have been working hands in hand with Thai Tuna Industrial Association, with Thai Union, to introduce the concept of ethical recruitment. And they also operate both in Thailand and Myanmar to making sure that the business partner will be able to build capacity on recruiting migrant worker without any excessive fee and cost. It actually benefit to the business themselves as well as to the benefit of the worker. And it was well recognized. If you look at the website of Thai Union or Thai Tuna Association, they also made the reference to the collaboration with MWRN, especially MWRN as a migrant worker-led organization. They can build trust with the worker, and they also have neutral position as a third party to ensure the buyers that, we actually access to the factories, we talk to the worker can access to us and make a complaint if anything is not right. Most of the seafood company, they always say that they have the very strong human resource department. They could talk to their workers. However, it's not like when migrant workers talk with the NGO, they have more trust. We speak in the same language. We have more expertise to understand the cycle of recruitment and where fraud or corruption could occur. Another example work of anti-human trafficking NGO and Royal Thai government is usually about identify trafficking victim, locate where is a victim of trafficking, try to work with multidisciplinary team to provide rescue, rehabilitation of the worker, even send worker back home safely. All this work is require NGO collaboration. When actually Phil Robertson told me about this draft law and provide a briefing impact, what my immediate thought is that how could international organization actually fund grassroots organization and even the lawyer to help trafficking victims to continue the normal operation without any administrative burdens. And the current relationship we have with all the business sector, the largest seafood companies, to continue promote the ethical standard in their supply chain. How could we continue it too? And if there is no third party in the whole process of seafood supply chain, how could the buyer trust or even the customer trust that Thailand supply chain will not circle back to what had happened 5 or 10 years ago? And I felt like all this effort that we have built together, it could be collapsed overnight. And I think it will have impact on the confidence of the buyer if they want to continue sourcing seafood from Thailand. In addition, in the COVID response, Freedom Fund provide emergency relief to all the sick grassroots organizations to relieve the material supply, PPE kit, food, and all other urgent needs to the migrant communities which are hit hard by the COVID. But if this draft law is introduced, we could not mobilize any immediate response to the, disaster, COVID, or any other stuff. We just need to write the official letter, make the request, ask the government to get approved. By the time if Thailand got hit by unexpected situation, unforeseeable future, actually Thai people will be the one who suffer the cost of this draft law. Even the seafood companies who are billionaire will also affect this draft law, will be affected by this draft law. So to me, I think it's very important for the Royal Thai government to be reminded that what will be the adverse impact. And if civil society got hammered by the censorship, how should I say, arbitration, or we work without trust, or we work as we got monitored by the government all the time. I think it will be hard for NGO to act like a whistleblowing, to notify the society on what is not right or what is the impact or what happened with the marginalized group here. So I think that will be my immediate, I would say like my first round of the discussion, which I try to give you some, idea on the impact beyond the NGO community here.
Great. Thank you so much for that. That's very interesting, and it shows that there is these kind of cross-industry civil society collaborations that are very important, that are ongoing, and that might face a problem if this draft law is passed. The floor is now open for questions. People can write questions in the Facebook Live comment section. We have someone monitoring those. Annalie has kindly agreed to do that and will send those to me. So if you want to ask a question, now is the time to do so. But since we haven't had any questions yet, I'm going to start with the first one, which is to all our panelists. looking at the first draft of the Thai NGO law, it set out very clearly that any sort of foreign funding given to a Thai nonprofit, and the word Thai nonprofit was not narrowed in any way. So this could be anything, any organization in Thailand that does not earn a profit. It could be association. It could be a local club of a sports club. It could be the FCCT. The FCCT doesn't earn a profit, and it's an association. All these things would be covered by this law. It said any organization that receives foreign funding would have to receive prior permission from the Ministry of Interior to receive that foreign funding. And I guess my question to you is, what is driving this concern with foreign funds? Why is the government now deciding that foreign assistance or foreign development assistance or foreign support of the sort that you mentioned, Rosai, why are they deciding that this is now a problem? What do you think is going on within the Thai government that would explain this?
I can go first.
Please go ahead. You go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yes, I'm excited. So I felt like if I get start off first, I can I don't have to carry the big weight on my shoulder. So basically, I heard that the Thai. I actually miss the Royal Thai government. We haven't well cooperated since the social distance was introduced. None of the anti-human trafficking NGO hold regular meeting with the government as usual. And unfortunately, in last month, the State Department just announced that they will downgrade Thailand trafficking performance to the Tier 2 watch list from the last year. Thai government got the Tier 2, so it was quite sad news for the government, and they were very disappointed. However, I heard that the Thai government think that maybe the international organization that operate on human trafficking provide the information to State Department or manipulate the progress or the performance of Thai government. So then Thai government got downgraded unfairly. And I'm not sure what is the motivation here, but this is the feedback that I learned. So I heard that they would like all the international organization and local organization working on human trafficking to submit the annual report and remind that they would like us not to echo the voice to the external stakeholders. But I think they misunderstand. For us, as anti-human trafficking advocate, Thai government is always our prime audience when we want to send the message about the policy challenge, the ineffective law enforcement, or even the issue of corruption. And we always identify ourselves as a friend of this the Royal Thai government, and we want to identify the challenge that we can work it out together. And I think this sort of mistrust with the international organization is manageable. If you search my name or if you search the organization that we are working, we actually raise our voice very loud and clear enough with the Royal Thai government. We always submit the letter of concern to our counterpart, either Department of Fishery, the Thai Maritime Unit, or even the Ministry of Labor on the issue that we identify on the ground. So I think we don't have the communication problem. But if Thai government try to put the filter on the way we should communicate, I think the problem will start from there.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to add something to that?
Can I go next? So I can.
Please do. Please go, PK, and then I'll ask Katya.
Yes. So obviously this is political tools to silence opposition, and the government see human rights NGO as opposition because they are the one who tell the world about how shameful they are. But however, the law itself, which will impact not only human rights organization but impact all level of organizations or even groups. I probably when they're trying to use this foreign money, I don't think it's a new thing because this is in the past few years, at least 40 countries have facing these problems that their government is trying to use repressive law to control NGO. So this is likely the global one of the global trends that showing how government use their excessive powers. And now Thai government clearly join the clubs of those oppressive governments to the civil society. I mean, I think more likely this is also the I think that the governments or anti-democracy or people who not support the right to participation or association would try to misleading the perceptions because there's so much of the young people come out to the street exercise their rights on public assembly, but then people start to question how could they do all sort of this. They must have some support, some for funding, and this if it bring bad things for or outside people outside Thailand to have some negative perception about the country, they must get the support from foreign funds. So instead of human rights NGO or civil society trying to urge the government to follow the obligations on human rights, they're trying to use this foreign money laundering to misleading the perception and use it as an excuse or, as I mentioned earlier, the political tools to do something with the civil society. And this is not new. And also, like if they do whatever it takes. Earlier, few years ago, the local civil society cross cultural foundation launched a report on torture by authority in Deep South province, and people involved in this report, the director, the local group, and the chair, got charged by seditions. So that's just one of the example that civil societies organizations that at risk just by doing their jobs. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Katya, would you like to add something there on that?
Yeah, I mean, just to go back to the fact that indeed, you know, the scrutiny over foreign funding is one of the key issues that the special rapporteurs jointly have identified as one of the areas of concern of the current draft law, which brings all the way back to violation of Article 22 of the ICCPR, which violates freedom of association. So, and which is a key driving element of enabling, of course, a democratic space. So just to reiterate this very important point of concern, of course.
Great, thank you very much for that. We now have some questions coming in from the audience, so I'm going to now move to those. We have a question from Zali Mortimer, who asks, well, she says, thanks for the presentation. How will this draft law impact environmental activism and environmental NGOs, particularly small organizations? Who would like to take that?
Go first. Oh, sorry.
Please go ahead.
I mean, of course, it will be impact largely, and especially when Thai government have the laws that prevent people from the national forest or national park, and that will impact a lot of communities. And then there's a group of NGOs or people who do the movement on land rights will be impacted deeply because they are doing a lot of legal support or speak up or working with this group. So it will be impact not only the environmental group itself, but it's in terms of community rights and also the rights of people too.
Rosa, you wanted to add something?
Yeah. Since Thai government and Thai business sector are always promote themselves that they are trying to meet the ESG, which is very hype word, environmental, social, governance goal to secure confidence from investor and consumer. Any small organization that work on these three topics will find a hard time to operate here. Most of the small organizations, they don't have enough budget at least to register themselves. To register in Thailand, you need to put the 300,000 baht as a deposit. It's kept by the government and you cannot touch it at all. Last year, Freedom Fund actually support the migrant-led organization to register as a foundation. We actually want our partner to comply with all the domestic law. We actually have to find like independent consultant to work with that organization, develop rules and regulation, appoint 10 board members, drafting the whole regulations, what policy, HR policy, and so on. It will be a lot of administrative burden and it wouldn't work. Another issue that I missed to mention, but I am worried about this draft law, especially for human rights, I would say like labor rights organization. We actually store a lot of sensitive data and information of the worker who file us the complaint, especially related to the business and companies here. And the law itself allow authority to take our computer and open our computer and review all the data. If this type of information is leaked out to the third party, I do believe that it will cause what I experienced so far is corruption. When someone shouldn't access certain information, they should ask benefit and financial gain from that sensitive information from any stakeholder that involved and so on. I think a lot of spillover effect about this draft law has not been well calculated by priority, and especially Amnesty already mentioned that they never invite any stakeholders to discuss. When the government think about themselves, they don't understand the business model of NGO, and they use I don't know what sort of information that they use to decide the draft law, but I believe this type of spillover effect will be showing up more and more. And at the end, Thai society will, greatly suffer by this draft law together.
Okay, thank you. Katya, would you like to say anything, or would?
I mean, just to echo and reiterate what has already been said, certainly not only environmental organizations, but grassroots organizations to a large extent will be the ones facing more severe repercussions, including because of the burdensome also reporting procedures around that, and facing a range of risks which go from fines, of course, all the way to more serious ones like imprisonment. So there is a lot at stake.
Thank you. Yes, this is something I think that is actually, there was a number of comments that were made to the Council of State in March by a number of groups who were submitting comments as part of the first participatory sort of review of that law. And a number of people made that exact point, that this would fall most heavily on some of the smaller NGOs or community organizations, who may only have a few members or may have just a community group that doesn't have the kind of capacity that would be needed to do the kind of registration and provide the reporting and the financial reporting and all the other things that would be required of them under this law. A number of the questions that have come in actually talk about applicability of the law. So we have Laura Mallock has asked, what does this mean for smaller friendship groups and organizations that make donations and support communities within Thailand? Are they all included in this new law? And then we have another question from Robert Fox, who says, it looks like chambers of commerce and their committees and many other kinds of associations as, end quote, NGOs would need to register, comment. And if they get foreign funding, they need permission, question mark. So, again, there's a lot now. People are starting to wake up to the fact that this law may actually cover the association or group or club or whatever that they're part of, and not realize until this moment that, oh my goodness, we might be caught up in this as well. What's your comment about that, folks?
Definitely, for me, okay, there are many types of foreign association in Thailand. For me, I'm working with the Burmese Worker Association here. As you know, many Thai government, Thai law actually prohibit migrant worker to form the trade union, and that's the fundamental rights of the worker. But collective bargaining and association is the, I would say, basic human instinct, and many migrant community here, they did they are doing the same as many foreigners or expats doing, basically trying to set their own association, support each other. All this type of activity will be classified as criminal if you don't ask permission, and you must be ensured that you will get the approval first before any operation at all. So either you'll be called Rotary, Lion Club, Protecting, all those type of things. If you get 1 baht, $1, 1 Myanmar Jack, whatever, 1 Malaysia ringgit, you receive foreign funding and you are subject for the imprisonment, I guess.
Yeah. The requirement is that if you must comply, and that there's a penalty if you don't comply of up to 5 years in prison and 100,000 baht penalty. That involves with registration. But this is something that has come up. Actually, somebody was asking me this. Someone involved in charities, where they collect funds from the Plunchit Fair every year. Money is collected from the Plunchit Fair. It's a wonderful fair. People donate money. People go and have fun. The fair makes money, obviously in pre-COVID times. And then, from the proceeds, there are donations made to a number of charities around Thailand. And the question is now, would all those charities have to ask permission to receive money from the proceeds of this fair? And it looks, according to the analysis I've seen, that the answer is yes. So, I think one of the issues that has come up, and this is one of the things that the special rapporteurs made, was talking about this issue. So, Katya, what do you make of the fact that there is expansive definition of nonprofit organization, included in this draft law that makes it cover almost everything under the sun?
Yeah, Phil. Well, again, this is certainly one of the key issues that the special rapporteurs picked up on, because the definition is the cornerstone around which then the entire legislation is developed. And lack of clarity around the definition, or making it so vague that it could literally everything and anything can fall under it, is one of the problematic aspects of it. So it needs to be as clear as possible in order to avoid leaving room to any misreading or misinterpretation of what actually being a non-profit organization means.
Puna, do you want to add anything on that?
Yes, definitely. I just want to add that when we facing this challenge, the governments always use the term, if you don't do anything wrong, you shouldn't be worried. So it means you can be have to send a report, you have to be transparency, although they are the one who have to be questioned about transparency. But however, it seems like it will be pick and choose, and either charity or NGOs or the group of any association, you don't know when it's going to happen to you and the troubles too. It probably be that time is if there's some type of explosion in the big factories and you do the donation, but then people start to question about the government regulation, they might be in trouble too. So, and especially if you're being charged, the trial process, it will take a long time, although maybe at the end you will be win, but it will cause a lot of trouble. So they just do their best to just do everything to make it your life difficult. Thanks.
And Annie had some direct experience with that, I understand. Making your life difficult. I think wasn't there an issue a couple years ago? Yeah. So we have a couple other questions that have come in. One of these, actually, I mean, the Ministry of Interior has been set up in the draft law as being the key ministry that would be involved in all these. And Kim Atkinson says, or asks, has the government indicated how it would process requests for registration? How would it handle questions and issues arising in the conduct of business of the myriad associations which fall under this new law? What are the standards that associations are expected to follow in operating under this law? So the capacity of first of all, the capacity of the Thai government to handle a massive registration process. If there's a mandatory registration process for nonprofit organizations across the board, do they have the capacity to do that? And do we know how they would do it?
May I go first?
Please go ahead.
I think we don't even know the process of how this law, like the timeline and the process of this law. All we know is just very fast track and super express that they try to push this. And if you live in Thailand, you're foreigners, you're probably getting used to today there's one thing and tomorrow there's next thing in the like government regulations. So there's no certain. I'm sorry, I have to say that. Yeah, and the capacity will be limited for sure.
Do others want to? I mean, the Ministry of Interior is fairly bureaucratic. Do others want to comment on whether they would be able to handle this burden? My understanding of the draft law was that they said that once it passed, everybody would have to register within 30 days or would have to file an application within 30 days. So, it is a very fast track if in fact this law does become a law, that they're moving very quickly on this. Does the Ministry of Interior have that capacity? I think it's an open question. We have other questions that have come in. There's a question from Kartik Wanitsiri talking about the issue of the anti-money laundering, counter-terror or terrorist financing provisions or principles that were given by the Anti-Money Laundering Office to the Council of State. She says, has the OHCHR NGOs contacted the Financial Action Task Force for its official statement or position on the Thai government claim to comply with the standard official or standard provisions. If become in effect, this law will be silencing local organizations and grassroots groups. So has anybody spoken to the Financial Action Task Force, which is, of course, the intergovernmental group that deals with issues related to money laundering and terrorist financing, about this Thai law? I think they wanted to ask OHCHR if you'd done that.
Thanks, Phil. Well, in this case, of course, we take as a starting point what special procedures have said in the past and what are the key standards related to the inclusion of principles related to money laundering, on counterterrorism, or limiting weapons of mass dissemination. And of course, the ultimate concern being not using this legislation as a way to curtail democratic space and to limit the ability of civil society organizations to operate. We have been following the entire legislative process, and we have been providing our comments, of course, and we will continue to do so.
I would like to add from the donor point of view, because we actually fund we are funding small organizations in Thailand. Freedom Fund is a registered charity in UK, and we also comply with the UK law we conduct due diligence process with all the partners. We have clear set of requirements, and even partner who actually sign contract with us, we also check their background, review a lot of their document, financial report. We also have that type of responsibility as a donor as well. But again, we don't make it like, how should I say, crime. We trying to understand what is the administrative issue of our partners, but I would like to ensure Thai government that all the donors in Thailand, we are so comply by the issue of money laundering, transparency in the financial management too, and all the international organization, they usually we always public annual report, and you are welcome to read our report about our works here too. Instead of putting the law that no one will have that everyone will have a hard time to comply, you can at least try to understand the business model of NGOs first.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have a question from Kun Earn Satapat. Earn asks, how did the NGOs in Thailand register with the government previously? What are the current requirements to register an NGO in Thailand? Would anybody like to take that one on? Because obviously the presumption is if there has to be a new law, that something must be wrong with the old system.
I mean, I just can say briefly that the existing system is already create difficulties for the small NGO because there's a lot of requirements, especially the financial parts, because obviously lots of small NGOs, they might not have enough fund to proceed that. And if they get funding from overseas, there might be question again too. So normally they sign with the if it's an international NGO, would be Ministry of Labor, and if it's local NGO, likely to be with the Ministry of Social Development and Human Securities. And for Amnesty, we are registered as associations. We register with Ministry of Interior. So it depends how would you want to be in what legal entities, in terms of legal entities.
to me, at least all the documents are required in Thai, and I'm working with the Myanmar migrant workers just to be able to file the application in Thai language only. That's very difficult to many of them. And we tried to register one of our partner organizations last year during the COVID pandemic. You are still required to go to the office and submit the document in person. And what I remember on top of my head is the deposit of the money, auditing report by the external, which I mentioned that then you need to have budget to do auditing and internal audit of your organization. You need to have board members who are approved as a good persons, and your board member must be Thai and chairman must be Thai, or maybe board member can be foreigner but chairman must be a Thai person. So again, I believe like any foreign association, expat community, and migrant workers, basically you cannot just it's not easy if you don't hire someone or hire lawyer to help you register. It's almost impossible for them.
So basically what you're talking is organizations having to use resources, if they have them, to be able to register.
Yeah.
I also know, I do know that international organizations are required to register with the Ministry of Labor. That is connected to also expatriates who have work permits and things like that. And that there is an annual reporting process. I think there's quarterly reports, and renewals involve investigations of the office by the Special Branch Police, by members of the Supreme Command of the military, and also by the Department of Employment. So the international NGOs that are registered in Thailand already have quite close scrutiny by the government and by an interagency committee that oversees their applications and renewals. So, I mean, there is a pretty strenuous system already involving the regulation of international NGOs operating in Thailand. We have some more questions coming in. Kun Supawadi Chotikajan asked, given the state of play, what's the percentage chance of putting a stop to this draft NGO law from being passed? What do people think about that? What are the chances of stopping this? I mean, what are you seeing is to expand a little bit further, what is driving this within the Thai government? Why now? Why is there such a big push for this law now? And also, obviously, what is the chance of stopping it? I'm not sure we can put a percentage on it, but your thoughts on that, please.
Unfortunately, we don't have a representative of real Thai government to respond on that. I think the main question for me is actually why the government still continue this draft law if you now can listen from a lot of stakeholders. I know that international community, diplomats, even some of the business sector address the concern with the Thai government. Civil society submitted a lot of letters of concern. The question from the government, why you could not stop this law, what actually drives you, why you have to continue, I would say. I couldn't answer. I think without participating this part, the discussion tonight, I think Royal Thai government has speak somewhat in the silent way. What do they think about this draft law?
Thank you.
I just want to add, Kun Roysai, that we in the path of trying to withdraw this law, although we do not know what hope we have. We can't say in percentage, but we can't be silent. And it will be damage to Thai government as much as to the NGOs too. But the worst, it would be damaged for the people who supposed to get all the benefits and support from the works of NGOs or small organization or the groups. What can we hope that along the path of these laws that they're trying to put, if there would be the dimensions or any concrete things that the impact that business or Thai government trade or deals, if they can see that it might be one of the tickle points, and also the international communities cannot be silenced and have to be pushed on and trying to make the Thai government in the hot seat not to push this law forward.
Okay. Katu, do you have anything you want to add on that one?
Yeah, maybe just to add on the element and importance of public participation and consultation, which again, it's one of the key messages of the special rapporteurs, but also of the need of any draft piece of legislation upon promulgation to be fully in line with international human rights standards and commitments which have been made by Thailand, also through ratifying a number of international human rights treaties.
I noticed that, you spoke about the fact that Thailand was downgraded recently in the U.S. State Department's latest trafficking in persons report from Tier 2 to Tier 2 watch list. And of course, this caused a lot of consternation and anger within the Thai government about that. And then I saw also that there was a letter that was sent by a number of NGOs to the U.S. Secretary of State, raising concerns about this Thai NGO law and saying that if, in fact, it did pass, this would negatively impact the efforts of whistleblowers and others working on human trafficking issues in Thailand to be able to do their job. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
To me, I think it's fair. When we submitted the letter to the Thai government to address the concern or the impact of this draft law on business and human rights, we also note that Thai government is now preparing to enter FTA, free trade agreement, with the European Union. And one of the requirements is the adoption of international labor standards, including international labor 8798. What is the full name? Collective bargaining and association for the workers. Freedom association. Thank you. Sorry, this is the problem with NGO people. We use too much acronyms. So then, if the draft law approved, it's another restriction for foreign workers in Thailand, to form any type of association. And Thailand is now amending the Labor Relations Act in order as a domestic law on the freedom of association, so they can meet the international standard of freedom of association, the ILO 87 and 98. So we actually do not understand if you approve this draft law, and how could your domestic law will meet with the international law that require you to commit before Thailand FTA, before you enter negotiation with EU on free trade agreements.
And hasn't Thailand also adopted a national action plan on business and human rights that talks about participation issues?
I mean, like, I'm not impressed by National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, but I would like to Thailand to review the business risks if they approve this draft law, especially in the area of labor rights. As you know, you may have heard that our neighbor Malaysia is facing hard time with the U.S. government Custom and Border Protection Act, which prohibits the rubber glove of one company to be exported to the U.S. market because it's linked with the forced labor. And a lot of Thai products are also produced by migrant workers. And we have faced a lot of criticism on the forced labor in supply chain and the risks that we may adverse to that point. And I always say that NGOs are your ally to continue to improve your supply chain and ensure that vulnerable workers will access to rights and remedy. But if Thai government don't see our role to actually support your work and keep hammering us, people who pay the cost of government, how should I say, narrow mind, will be the whole society. Sorry, it's not only you. What will be the loss of the government? You earn tax from us, but you are not helping taxpayer at all, or you are not seeing the bigger issue of the problem. You only worry about the power. But again, always remember Thai people will pay the cost that you made, not yourself, not the ruler, not the administrator or the personnel of the government.
Thank you. Now, I mean, there's a lot of course, focus on what's happening next door in Myanmar or Burma, with the ongoing conflicts and the military junta there. We have a question from Ben Harkins, who said, can you specifically comment on how the law is likely to impact Myanmar CSOs? Historically, many of these organizations operated in exile in Thailand during military rule. Will that be impossible under this draft NGO law? Who would like to take that question?
No, if you remember last month, I think the Myanmar Exile News Agency journalist got arrested. And with the draft law, Thailand will no longer be a Geneva of the Southeast Asia. We are no longer hub of a non-profit organization. Sorry, no.
May I add a little bit about the impact from the conflicts in Myanmar, that during the time that people try to escape or seek support at the borders, the person who hero is a local NGO and a small NGO by the borders that work on that doing this, but instead of getting support from government, they're the one who get harassed and burdens. So this is already not doesn't have this law exist. So once they have the law exist, it will be greater impact for all the health and the neighboring countries, especially in Myanmar too, because the situation doesn't seem to be stable.
I've often heard the Ministry of Affairs in Thailand say that, they have the idea of being the Geneva of the East because, of course, they have this major hub of the UN here. They have many regional organizations based here in Bangkok. Some of the major powers have very large embassies here. I'm thinking about the United States and others. Will this law, if it's passed in its current form, threaten that moniker of Geneva of the East? Will this vision that has been trotted out by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs face difficulties? What do you think about that? And Katya, of course, you're sitting in the UN. What is the perception so far that from some of the UN agencies that you've heard? I mean, you don't have to name names of the different agencies, but I mean, is there concern within the UN country team or the other parts of the UN about this draft law, especially if it contains restrictions on foreign funding or makes it more difficult to operate with local NGOs? Okay.
I'm still here, but though I think my picture froze. I can see a frozen picture of myself, but if that's okay, maybe I'll just stay on.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think, I'm not sure I can speak on behalf of others, but I mean, for sure, again, the only strong foundation to any piece of legislation, even more so one which aims to provide a conducive environment for civil society to operate, has to be built and centered around international human rights standards and principles. And now with that foundation in mind, you can really advocate, or you can consider that legislation would be a role model. Anything which would fall short of those standards, of course, could not be considered a role model per se. And again, on the issue of limiting the ability to receive foreign funding, I would like to go back to the concern expressed by the special rapporteurs, which indeed is a violation of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which has been ratified by the Royal Government of Thailand. And so you have a very clear commitment that has been made there. So it all brings us back to the issue of compliance with international human rights standards and principles as a foundation to this and any other legislation, but even more so one which would aim at creating a conducive environment for civil society organizations.
Thank you for that. Geneva of the East, what do you think, Rosai and PK?
I don't know whether I will not answer the question, but maybe I would ask the question whether have the government been survey how many people will lose the job if the law pass. Freedom Fund support 5-6 organizations in Thailand. How many people are employed under this foreign fund? And you are about to take jobs from Thai people with this current economic climate. That's something I felt like government should reconsider. We are suffering economically, socially, and this is a hard time for everyone. So I think let the government answer my question. How many people will lose the job if you pass this draft law immediately, and by the time that they recovery, try to submit the application and restore the work? I think I would turn the question back to the Thai government. I'm not sure about Geneva. I never been there, couldn't imagine. But what I seen in Bangkok, it doesn't look like what I understand about Geneva.
For me, I just want to add that. Oh, sorry, Phil.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I just want to add that is instead of this is an opportunity that consider that we have like geographically and all those infrastructure that could consider a hub for the NGO and international organizations, and yes, it's also impact in terms of not only reputations but also the economies as well. I just want to give example like when we have a regional office of Amnesty International here. When we do register, we have to show them how many Thai people that we hire, and we have to do the financial reports. And I've been working with different international organizations in the past that have to prove that what value and what projects that is bring things good for the country. Although it's a lot of regional office here, many NGOs that support the work for Philippines, Laos, Vietnam, but they have to have a solid evidence and project to show that they bring good things for Thai country. So this would be one thing that would benefit the countries and peoples here who live here. But if it's create, which is the current regulation is already headaches, and there's still a lot of international NGOs here, like put up with that. But if this law passed, I'm not so sure how much more patient or how much more that that they can take this. Yeah.
I know that has been actually that I've been contacted by a lot of people about this draft law as well. I mean, there are many international NGOs, including a number of international NGOs who are operating in Myanmar and have had to evacuate because of the situation and moved here. There's a lot of concerns. Thailand has traditionally been a place where regional programs for NGOs can operate, not only in Thailand, but also in neighboring countries. So obviously that is a concern that, this could be a greater limitation. I have a question actually from someone who didn't use their real name, but they're Sai Bongkan COVID Dong Mi from Facebook, who asked, what's the positive issue or another side of the draft law? Which is a fair question. Is there a positive side to this law? Is there a positive aspect to it?
Local organization, some civil and Thai local organization believes that if they register, they hope that the government will allocate some of the budget to support the small organizations and Thai civil society instead of let civil society to rely on the international donor alone. However, I never see detail about the if you complete registration, what else benefit that the registered organization would obtain. So that's what I heard as added note. But again, I never see any information about that, written information about that.
Anybody else have anything that they're seeing that could be a positive side to this law as it exists now, or a positive aspect to it?
Just add a little bit from Kun Roy side that I think the intention of this law try to draft that according to what Kun Roy side mentioned, but somehow it became a political tool. The only positive side is it's helped us crystal clear see how repressive laws and this Thai government used widely. It's just like a strong evidence, and it's a very informal way to admit that they are like one of those government that using this repressive law to prevent people of associations. That is the positive side.
I know that the initial draft, actually, I mean, from what I understand, and there was 2 draft laws that were considered in February, and one was actually something that came out of the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security, which was something that Pianut made a reference to in her PowerPoint, which was going to be more of a promotional law that was going to say if you registered, you could get some benefits and potentially funding. But my understanding was, in fact, that that the fund that was supposed to be put in there was then taken out, that the government has moved away from that and is not supporting that. Is that the case as far as you know? I think we've lost. Hello, can you hear me? Oh, okay. It seems we've lost Rosa, at least temporarily. Okay, I have 1 or 2 more questions, and then we're going to call it an evening. Actually, we have some questions. We have a viewer from Taiwan who said, this is from Lenin Yingda Wong. I can sense the draft from a very similar law in China. which already made the once vivid civil society silent, at least on the surface. It's really bad. I have a few questions. Now Bangkok is almost like a center for international NGOs in Southeast Asia. If the new law is so strict, how will the international NGOs move? Will they try to move away? And how activists and CSOs in other countries who are working with Thai counterparts to stop or amend the draft new NGO law?
Maybe I would answer for that first, and
Please.
hoping other panelists can add. Well, we are working together among the civil society members, trying to push it forward. Although the government have inadequate consultation process, but we are trying to use that channels, as well as trying to arrange meeting, submitting letters, doing any media's work that we can do, but it might not be enough, and especially during this crisis time of COVID-19, I would think that it might have to get the help and support from other sectors as well, especially business sectors and international communities. Thank you.
Right. Well, yeah, that it's an international effort. Katya, do you have anything you'd like to add on that in terms of the sort of international solidarity angles here, and also what you're hearing on this?
Yes, I think, just to add on the point which was just made, which is the importance of participation, and to step up all the possible efforts to give the opportunity for that to take place. I think there is also an important element, which is with the addition of the latest edition of the principles related to money laundering, and and the cluster that came around that. It's important to note also how the very low awareness of this new provision exists, especially outside of Bangkok, and how it is important for participation and consultation to be meaningful, to unpack what those principles mean in a manner which is readily usable, without using the technicalities and the jargon that sometimes surrounds those principles. Otherwise, it doesn't really qualify as meaningful participation, regardless of how many would be conducted. You need to really give that clarity which is required for that to happen.
Thank you for that. It appears, Rosai, unfortunately, we've lost her, I think, probably for a technical issue, although I think she's trying to get back in. But we're pretty close to time already. So I'd like to ask each of our panelists to just say a few words to sum up, what has been a very interesting, in-depth panel on the issue of the draft NGO law. I do know that from my own experience that there is a sort of ongoing consultative process about these anti-money laundering, terrorist financing aspect. That this is, again, the Council of State sort of saying we will, take comments if you want to submit them through this portal. Oh, we've got Rosai back. That's fantastic. So I want to just give each of our panelists an opportunity to sum up and share any last thoughts they have about where we're headed with this Thai NGO law and what it's going to mean. Who wants to go first?
Okay, I go first. We will not stop pushing the government to withdraw this law, and we are not alone, and we have more islands. So and thanks for FCCT to let us speak today. As I mentioned at the beginning, I will speak why, as much as I can, why it's still legal to speak. And if we are not doing anything, we can't there will be a greater impact to people and especially who try to stand up for human rights and exercise their rights. I just also want to say that we will have online sessions next week on the 22nd that invite Amnesty Hungary and Amnesty India to speak about this law, and also the representative of Thai civil societies, because in Hungary they just managed to repeal this control NGO laws, and India, if you heard that we Amnesty have to close down because of this type of laws. And I just want to tell the government that you can't help yourself, but we are not going to be next Amnesty India. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. PK, also share the information about your upcoming seminar in the chat box of the Facebook Live on the website of the, excuse me, on the Facebook of the FCCT, so people can tune into that if they want. Who wants to go next?
To me, I think yes, I'm back, everyone. It's heavy raining in the south. So first, I would like if I catch up with the question properly, I think it's very important for me to continue having conversation with the business sector in Thailand, especially the companies, the seafood companies, either you are buyer or processor here, they have to understand the implication of draft law on their work, their reputation, and how it could damage the trust building between customers and Thai producers. I think it's very important for business to stand up with us and also help the Thai government explain to the Thai government what is the role of NGOs that has been continue working together, to make Thai supply chain become a trustable product for all consumers. And I think that will be what we will continue to do. For the Thai government, we would like you to have more consultations and engagement with broader stakeholders, because as everyone mentioned, the term of non-profit in Thailand, the term of non-profit in this draft law is very broad, and it affects to, I would say, like many people. And it's very important that they get the right consultation, spend enough time to learn about the impact, pro and con for all the sides. So that would be my two takes away that I'm going to leave. But again, I would say like I'm a professional worker of non-governmental organization. This will be my job. This is my job of my whole life. We will continue to work to address the issue of social justice. I'm a Thai person and committed to this issue. With or without this regulation, our work will continue.
Thank you. Katya, would you like to have a few words?
Yes, sure. I thought maybe we could end looking at the bigger picture, and Geneva was mentioned a couple of times, and that brings us, of course, to the upcoming Universal Periodic Review in November. And indeed, we're one of the recommendations of which had been endorsed by the government of Thailand has to do with bringing legislation which is related to freedom of assembly and expression in line with international human rights standards. And of course, the draft legislation we have been discussing tonight would fit squarely within that commitment made.
Yes, they have to. Well, and that will happen in November when basically governments from around the world will be quizzing the Thai government about their human rights commitments at the Human Rights Council in that Universal Periodic Review. So that's a very big international stage for Thailand to be answering some tough questions. And presumably, if they go forward with a draft law that doesn't meet with those international standards, they'll have a hard time. Okay, well, thank you so much for our three panelists, Pianut, Rosai, and Katya. Thank you for making time. Thank you to our come in and stayed with us throughout. We had quite a good turnout. Thank you very much to Dave Foster at Giant Digital Media, who has masterfully, again, produced this show and taken care of all the various different issues that makes this run smoothly, and we greatly appreciate your work. Again, the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand needs your support. Please do support the club. We hope to be open again when the restrictions on COVID lifts. And there will be an online event next Thursday, the 22nd, talking about Thailand and what went wrong with the vaccine programs. And so please tune in next Thursday for a very fascinating panel about COVID and the vaccination programs. Again, thank you again to my panelists, and good night.